Well, welcome everybody to our webinar, Navigating Cybersecurity Compliance, Integration and Operations. On behalf of ABB, Ms. Priscilla Fernandez, and I manage communications for our team at the ABB Marine Ports. And I am joined today with a fantastic group of experts discussing cybersecurity in the cruise industry. So with me, I have Ahmed Hassan from ABB. He is our go-to in the technology side for cybersecurity. I also have Jarle Blumhoff from Norway joining us on behalf of DNV. He is going to tackle a lot of the regulations that are out there. The technology is changing fast and regulations are adopting as we go. We also have Vernio Sanchez here from Miami with a beautiful background there representing the cruise industry. Thank you for joining us, Vernio. And to moderate this panel, my good friend John Snyder, the managing editor for Riviera Maritime. And welcome to everybody. With that, I'll just hand it to John. We will be taking questions. If you just click the little chat button on the right of your screen, we'll make sure that the answers to our questions are covered throughout the webinar. But if we don't get to it, we'll definitely answer and email them to you. With that, I'll hand it over to you, John. Thank you.
Well, great, Priscilla, and thank you for that introduction. And as Priscilla points out, welcome everyone, of course, to this webinar. As Priscilla highlighted, we have a stellar lineup of panelists today to talk about cybersecurity. Certainly ships, ports, and supply chains are becoming more connected to improve efficiency, productivity, and transparency. And ship owners are taking advantage of this connectivity for predictive maintenance, data collection and analytics, energy efficiency, and uninterrupted remote access. But this also provides hackers, cyber criminals, and bad actors with more points of entry into a company's operating systems and computer networks. The emergence of AI is changing the game too. Cybersecurity is a growing safety issue. Over the next hour, our panel will address compliance with cybersecurity regulations, integration of cybersecurity solutions, and cybersecurity operations. As Priscilla said, we'll be taking questions from our viewers. But first, let's get some opening thoughts from our panel. And to get the ball rolling, let me ask Vernil to provide his overview of the past few years on how digitalization has changed the maritime industry, and as a result, why cybersecurity has become an essential to vessel operations. Vernil, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for joining. John, I can tell you about the Carnival Corporation journey. For us, this started in 2018. We began this with an assessment which highlighted some areas that we should start working on. I called those the low-hanging fruit, but it really boiled down to people, process, and technologies, right? So one of the first things we did was define a framework of what we were going to do, tie that up to NIST, start building procedures based on that we could provide to our shipboard personnel, conduct training, different levels of training, webinars, et cetera. And then look at the technology stack that we could implement. Some things that we could borrow from IT, some things that needed to be unique to OT, right? Due to the complexities of our OT environments. And I would say the bow on top was building the collaboration with folks like Ahmed, right? Our third-party vendors, with folks like Jarle, with our regulators and class societies, right? And that really is what kicked off our ability to start working together, to start building relationships, number one, but also to start working on solutions together that were feasible based on what our classes and vendors thought were some things that we could implement, but also that were reasonable for us to operate at the same time. I would say that's kind of like the background. As we got into the weeds and looking at what was in there, we found obviously a lot of connectivity, a lot of network segmentation concerns. But we found also great people that helped us throughout the journey, right? To harden our environments, to work towards the future. And even if we had divergent thoughts, there was a lot of places where we met, right? And there was a lot of things that we've been able to accomplish together. So at least with these guys here on the call, we've been able to do a lot of things since the early days of our journey. Thank you, John.
Right. Thank you. And Yarli, now Vernil mentioned collaboration. How are you supporting his journey?
Yeah, thanks, John. I think we have a statement saying we safeguard life, property, and environment, right? And the only way to safeguard it also includes cybersecurity because it's a relevant safety risk. But our role is not operating vessels, not building systems. We try to support giving trust in these systems and in trust in these operations towards seafarers, towards passengers, towards charters, cargo owners. So I think that's our key part here, to try to come with best practices and support the keeping trust in those parts. So that's our key role. And it has been a long and interesting journey. Actually, interesting, Werner mentioned 2018. That's also when we released the first cybersecurity rules in DNV. It was more of a hobby project with a small group of people trying to get attention more than actually getting attention. And now we're in a phase where everybody talks about it. We see digitalization is happening across the boards. IT cybersecurity has been very relevant for a long period of time and getting quite mature, even though that's where the attack surfaces are the most. But now, while we do more digitalization connecting, you want to have the best out of operations, reduce fuel consumption, improve maintenance, get better operation of your ships. And that's where you also open up, and nobody would like to see a cruise ship or any other ship in bad weather close to shore getting bad software to the main engine, basically making a blackout of the vessel. So that's what I appreciate, the proactive approach to it. That all the stakeholders here in the meeting have been taken, and also that we see in the industry.
Now, Ahmed, what's your role in this partnership?
Of course, the digital transformation in ABB is a key domain, and ABB is recognized as kind of a key player and leading organization in this area. We have a lot of success stories about the autonomous vessels, asset performance management, remote diagnostic systems, and we have seen a trend recently that majority of the ship owners, they would like to have a connectivity to the vessel. They would like to have a remote support for maintenance, as well as to support in the critical events. So given all these like events and trends we have right now, we see cybersecurity as a key enabler to be able to grow in the digital transformation area. Back in the days, around 10 years ago, we started actually working with minimum cybersecurity requirements in ABB. Those are mandatory requirements that we have to follow in all the product lifecycle, including product development, project execution, as well as the service execution part of the lifecycle. Of course, while we are working in the minimum cybersecurity requirement, we have seen also that the maritime organization have improved significantly. As Vjornil and Jarla indicated, both ship owners and classification started to look into cybersecurity seriously. Classification Society started to introduce cybersecurity regulations that help both vendors, ship owners, as well as shipyards to improve and comply with cybersecurity. So definitely we started to partnership with Classification Society, with ship owners, with shipyards as well. We had actually a type approval for part of ABB products, control systems, like, for example, the automation system, propulsion system, and we have also assist our remote connectivity to the vessel. So I would say it was a long journey, as Jarla indicated, and it will be great during today that we share some of those insights for our experience in this journey.
Now, Ahmed, how do you ensure that cybersecurity is embedded into the design and the life cycle of your control systems?
Well, compliance with cybersecurity requirement, to be able to comply with requirement, we have to look into three main aspects here. We need to have processes, look into the processes, look into people and how the people are trained to follow those processes. And of course, we need to apply technology to be able to comply with cybersecurity requirement. And those three things has to apply in all stages for compliance. So if we think about, as a starting point, we need to look into the product. So the cybersecurity compliance need to start from a very early phase of product development. As indicated earlier, we have developed the minimum cybersecurity requirement, which is based on IEC 62443, which is a recognized standard in the cybersecurity in industrial automation. Those requirements is a must. So we have to fulfill the requirement before we release any product to the market. So the R&D team, they have to confirm compliance with the cybersecurity requirement. We also have to send the hardware, the developed hardware or software package to like a penetration testing center. We call it a DSAC, or the Device Security Assurance Center in ABB. So once the penetration testing is done, the DSAC center provide the product team with vulnerabilities that they have identified in the product. We have to close those vulnerabilities before we can release to market. So we have also seen that the product compliance, not only the system compliance, the product compliance is a very important aspect and key enabler for us to comply with cybersecurity requirements in the system level. So when I say system level here, it means when we put product together, right? So once the product comply with requirement, we connect those products together and then we deliver it on board the vessel. So of course, we have also developed a Marine Cybersecurity Essentials. That's our solution to comply with cybersecurity requirement. After we put all the systems together, this solution actually was part of the type approval. And of course, we will not be able to comply and apply this solution on board the vessel before we have a very well-trained cybersecurity engineers. And finally, to be able to comply, we need to have a teamwork, right? So when I say teamwork, I'm not talking about ABB internally only. I'm talking about all the stakeholders. So ABB is just one of the building blocks, but of course, classification society, shipyard, ship owners, we need all of us to be one team so we can actually achieve the cybersecurity compliance.
Right. Now, Ernil, what is the value of developing cybersecurity regulations that holistically address the responsibilities across owners, shipyards, and vendors? And what do you consider your biggest challenge in achieving compliance across such a diverse ecosystem?
Yeah, we are big proponents since the early days of when we didn't have regulation to have regulation that made sense, right? So we collaborated plentiful with our class societies before they even wrote their regulations. We think they actually listened, and we think that what they've written for us to comply with is very reasonable. We also see that with a lot of port and flag states. Those are the places that we go to, or the places that put their flag on our ships, where they are very reasonable in their approach to writing regulations. And I don't mean reasonable in a way that these are easy things that we could just do and check off a box. I mean that they make sense for us, right? They're maritime focused. You could tell folks are sitting down at a table and thinking about the industry. So we find great value in these regulations. They also help us validate some of the thoughts we had in terms of here are the controls we should be putting in place, were also very reasonable. So we used it in a different way where actually the regulations, we were using them to say, okay, all these thoughts we had about what is a safe ship makes sense now that others are validating those thoughts in industry, right? So for us, that's the way we see regulation. One of the great things that Amit touched on is on how they develop their product. And we borrow some of those thoughts, right, from the ABBs of the world and some of our other vendors on how we integrate those products, right, internally, right? So a lot of controls from segmentation to how do we do remote access for these tools? How do we do endpoint protection for our OT? How do we do backups in the OT environment? So it also helps us with what we call the owner-provided, owner-supplied tools for our ships to make them jive and work together. This collaboration that we have with the yards, with the ABBs, and how these regulations actually meet for all of us are part of what makes us successful, I would say, today.
Now, Jarle, he mentioned, working with class, and could you tell a little bit how class rules have evolved to address emerging OT cybersecurity threats, and how you're working with people like Carnival in that process?
Yeah, it's not always easy, right? We sit here in our offices, engineers writing interesting rules that we think make sense on papers, and we publish them. That's not the value of what we make, right? The value is when somebody takes them into use and actually applies them, not one ship, but the multitude of ship. And that's the impressive standardization and how maritime is driven, right? It's quite incredible that a global industry moving the world agrees to common standards. And it's very rewarding to be part of that, but it's also a big responsibility. If we come with some nonsense rules, it means that you lose trust in this aligned way of working. So when we develop rules, we have a few guiding principles. We should make something which is feasible to use for the industry. And the only way to check that is to do it together with the industry. And that's why we have had ongoing early projects, as Ahmed mentioned. We did it early. We were not perfect then, neither were the systems, neither were ship owners, but we together made the rules better. We made the systems better, providing better vessels. So this is crucial for us. Also now with Carnival being one of the pioneers in the area as well, looking into the next generation of barriers, because the attackers and threats are evolving. So it means we also need to be proactively looking into what can protect the vessels as we go forward, because I think the IACS unified requirements are basic for the whole global industry, right? But for a cruise ship, there may be other risk profiles and other barriers needed, especially considering the big hotel IT equipment on board. And these are very rewarding discussions, again, to come up with feasible, realistic solutions and not something that doesn't make sense or is too costly. Another thing which I really appreciate with this IACS unified requirement and how the industry approaching it may sound Greek for the one that haven't talked about it, but what Ahmed said about the IEC 62443. Why does that make sense? Because it's not a standard that DNV, ABB, or Carnival came up with. It's an internationally recognized standard for control system cybersecurity, which means that the manufacturer of PLCs, computers, HMIs around the globe use this standard, which means that the maritime industry can use the big developments happening in manufacturing, power grids, nuclear powers, automotive around the world, and take advantage of a cost-efficient implementation. So this IEC standard is core, and it makes a very cost-efficient and good implementation.
And Ahmed, do you have anything to add to that as a vendor?
Well, I fully agree with what the guys have added here, and yeah, the collaboration here help everyone around the table in this industry to, like, as Jarle indicated, to have requirements that make sense, and actually these requirements are possible to put it in practice, right? So if the requirements are not achievable or very difficult to achieve, then it becomes very difficult actually to continue the work altogether. So I would say it's a very good point that we have been working all together in an early phase to kind of develop those standards and apply it on the vessels. And of course, if it's based on IEC 62443, which is a recognized standard, then it actually can be applied in several devices where we have an ABB, for example.
Right. And then now, Vernil, of course, Carnival is one of the world's largest cruise companies. And obviously you have lots and lots of assets and various stages of their life. How do you prioritize and implement OT cybersecurity measures across such a diverse fleet with varying system maturity?
Yeah, I think I may have touched on a little bit of this, but at a high level, we see three buckets for this: the people bucket, the process bucket, and the technology bucket, right? So when it comes to people, we do a lot. There's a lot of efforts internally for training personnel. There's general awareness training, focus training that goes just to deck and engine personnel, which just focuses on OT. We do a lot of webinars. We actually interjected cybersecurity training into our academy at Sea Smart. We have one of the leading academies in the maritime industry. So we have a half-a-day course there for cybersecurity as well. So you can see there is a trend, at least, to get the people up to speed on the right topics and the right understanding, depending on the role. From a process standpoint, we actually have a full organization for compliance, which is one of my peers. And we handle compliance end to end, from writing the procedures and mapping things out to regulations and standards, to ensuring the ships are compliant, checking on them, and actually working the life cycle of the findings, even if they're internal. And then from a technology standpoint, our approach is, we dip our toe in the water. This is a challenging place to do that because a lot of our systems are vendor managed, which requires, again, a lot of collaboration. Most of our systems have some sort of notation from the class society, which is basically a shield that says, watch out when you're touching this, you got to be very careful in what you're changing. So that you can tell just by the nature of that, there's a lot of collaboration for anything that we're trying to do with our OT environments. However, we do everything that is sensible, everything that is under our control. For example, like the integration between IT and OT, those touch points, where we have full control of those environments, we make sure we put very strict controls there. And then when you have integrations between OT and OT, we make sure that we collaborate with the vendors to make sure that the firewalls they put in place, the controls they put in place to control traffic between their OT systems are, let's say, up to par with our expectations. We have defined what those expectations are. We've written, our internal procedures on here's what we expect from our vendors in terms of deployments. And it talks about a lot of controls, not just segmentation. It talks about here's how you harden your system, right? We have issues with passwords, but the maritime industry has issues with passwords. But we work with our vendors on that, on ensuring we have complex and difficult to guess passwords, right? That we have other controls, if possible, like multi-factor authentication. We work with them on remote access because those are sensible things that we can control. It's interesting because one of the first things that we controlled in the maritime industry was the use of USB drives. And you wouldn't think about that, right? You would say that doesn't make any sense. Why would anyone be thinking about that? But you'd be surprised on how prevalent that is used on ships, right? Just to move data, to download something, to move something from one system to another, to update a chart, etc. So that's one of our first controls, which is pretty funny. It was very interesting to me. But from there, we've done a lot of things collaboratively with the vendors. They've done a lot of things to improve their systems too, in parallel, right? So it's not like just Carnival went on a silo here and put controls. We saw the ABBs of the world also come up and step up to the plate and do different and better things and improve their procedures and policies and improve the technologies that we're leveraging as well. So it's been teamwork all the way. I know we keep saying the teamwork and collaboration, but this is truly how this works in the maritime industry.
Right. And of course, you always have to deal with updates of software for various equipment on board, potential introduction of possibly some type of virus or impact on other equipment on board?
Yeah, you know, we are thankful we've been able to deploy a network analyzer. We'd love to be able to have a little more visibility into our environments. But one of the takeaways that we've gotten from it is that we can see anomalous network traffic on our OT environments. We've been able to remediate a lot of issues related to things like having infected assets or malware on an asset, et cetera. Normally the procedure would be we collaborate with the vendor, we talk to them, we say, hey, what is the risk of us trying to, number one, isolate this asset from this system? And then what can we do to quickly cleanse this asset, right? Or, replace it if we have to. So those are things that we've matured over the years. Those were things that were not even a thought, I would say, back in 18, 19. And today they're par for the course. It's Ahmed expects that call if I have an issue, or I'm going to say, hey, Ahmed, we need your guidance on how we're going to handle this issue. And we have, multiple means in which an issue can come into our ships. But again, those USB drives, they're pesky and they give us a lot of trouble. But yeah, this is kind of like how it works today, little collaborative approach, but a more mature approach to being able to, number one, find things automatically, and two, being able to quickly resolve them.
Right. Now, we've been talking about existing or legacy assets. What about during the new build phase? How do you ensure cybersecurity solutions are effectively integrated into a vessel's design? And what role do you play in aligning shipyard and vendor efforts with your long-term operational and compliance goals?
It's interesting because we rely heavily on the processes that the shipyards have, but we've been able to influence them plentiful lately. So we have two regulations, E26 and 27. I think everyone in the maritime industry has heard about those things. And for all our new builds that are coming down the pipeline, which we were able to put into this contract, because it's also another thing in the maritime industry is that the contracts for the ships usually precede the build of the ship by about 3 years. So folks, may be led to believe like ships that were coming out last year were compliant. They were not. So we're starting to see the compliant ships coming out, this year and moving forward. But one of the things that we do now is our agreements are to, number one, obtain early on all the documentation that the vendors are submitting to the yards. And we now have a stake at the table where we are doing our internal reviews. So we do a collaborative review internally here at Carnival. We have a architectural team and our maritime cyber safety team reviewing all the documents, providing some feedback, asking for clarification when we can, and then making sure that we're mapping the 26 and 27 controls into what we see the vendors proposing. Then the shipyard is actually at the center of all this, collaborating with the vendor, collaborating with the class, ensuring that everyone is in agreement that we are checking off on the right controls. For us, it's more than controls. Obviously, we have owner-supplied systems. We have some additional requirements that we have where we just call them best practices. But this is all funneled through the yard to all of us here representative on this call, right? To the vendor, to the class societies, and to us, the ship owners, operators.
Right. Now, Jarli, I guess, what do you see as the biggest gaps between regulatory compliance and actual cyber resilience on board?
I think it comes back to what both Ahmed and Verniel mentioned. It's about the people, process, technology, right? Like any safety topic. That's if you have a lifeboat, you need people that are able to use and lift and lower that lifeboat. You need proper technology and you need procedures to maintain it. And what we see is that this training of people is a task that's been ongoing for a while. People are getting more and more aware. Everybody had this Cybersecurity Awareness Month now in October. I think every company in the world is almost having it. So the awareness on the people is really increasing. But this is a continuous task. It will never finish. But at least I think this is quite well placed so far. The other task is about the procedures to get those into place. The maritime industry has been working a long time with safety procedures. How do you make sure that no incidents happen or that the effects and consequences of them are as little as possible? I think that in general, for a global industry, having that impact on the world, we're really good at safety and we focus on it. I think the procedures, that cybersecurity is just another safety topic. Just another, of course, it's an important part, but all the other part of safety are still important. So I think that fits into a framework that ship owners are used to. When it comes into the technical parts, I think there we have more the bigger challenge. The first part is network integration. This is hugely important and the number one task you should do even with existing ships. So no chief engineer would ever accept to be on board if he didn't have the GA plan of all the machinery on board, right? The smallest bolts and nuts. Mm-hmm. But they don't know about the network. They don't know about the firewalls. So the watertight integrity of the network is not known. I think this is now to bring transparency on how things are segregated to avoid crew entertainment, passenger entertainment system, be able to put malicious code down into the control system. This is a major impact of the IXUR, but it's also something that we see is maturing now by owners in operation, but also through yard integration, because now it's in their ballpark. But the final part is the systems. A vessel is built up of many, many systems on board, small suppliers, bigger suppliers, standalone system, integrated systems. And all of these systems have a primary task to be safe, reliable, as simple as possible and not connected. And now suddenly we start connecting it. And they typically have a development cycle of several years. So that's where we see the biggest task ahead of us. And I think that's also where we'll see the biggest challenge comparing existing vessels to new vessels. New vessels will slowly have better equipment on board, but existing vessels will live for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So that's why the people, process, technology part is important, and a defense in-depth strategy. Clever, competent people on board will avoid viruses coming on board. Proper network segmentation will ensure that exposed networks are not going into safety critical networks, and by that we protect equipment on board which may not be as secure as we want them to be.
Now, does DNV have a best practices supporting cybersecurity?
Yes, so that's the rules that we made back in 2018, which have been a journey together with Verniel and Ahmed. It's based on this IEC standard, which again thinks it makes it easier, because if ABB had to make one version for DNV, one for another class society, and one for another customer, it would be too costly. That now it can be one equipment with one set of. And even if some suppliers produce for different industries, they can still relate to the same standard. If somebody makes a power generation for shore and ships, they can use the same standard. So I think this IEC standard is very important. And what we did is we take this cybersecurity rules and just put it into the current current class processes. So we around the world have people that look at cybersecurity design of systems, of vessels. We look at procedures of how safe operation is done. We visit ships around the globe, and we also attend factory acceptance tests at suppliers and new buildings testing at yards. So we just add the cybersecurity aspect in current processes according to this IX unified requirement.
And Ahmed, what challenges do you see then in this process of aligning your systems with regulatory and ship owner requirements?
Well, when it comes to challenges, I would say one of the key challenges that we see so far in the regulations is how actually different classification society or different shipyards, owners kind of interpret or understand those requirements. Sometimes they are a little bit different. The shipyards are they understand the requirement very well, but when they want to apply those requirements, it becomes a little bit different. So they want to do it in a different ways. So we started to learn in ABB that we need to be more flexible to meet customer, because again, those are our customers by the end of the day, classifications, the shipyard or the ship owner. So we need to be flexible. We need to try to fulfill the requirement the way that they see it. However, of course, to be able to be productive, we have introduced a very standard way to comply with these requirements. Make sure that we verify all the solutions that we are using on board the vessel and as part of our OT system. And when I say verification here, actually the verification of the cybersecurity technology before we apply it on an OT system is a key and a very important task that we have to do. And I think all the vendors, all the OT vendors have to do as well. So as Vjornil indicated, we need to apply a cybersecurity technology in our systems to comply with those requirements. And verifying the technology is something that we used to do for years now. And when I say verifying the technology, I'm not only talking about verifying the software itself. We also verify how the software is applied to the OT system. I mean, what kind of procedures can be used, and also verifying the patches and the updates for this solution, just to make sure that when we patch the solution and when we update the solution, it doesn't cause any interruption for the OT system. Since the OT operation or the system to stay in operation, that should be our main focus in cybersecurity. That's why we always recommend the ship owners that we use verified solutions, or if there is a solution that they want specifically use, then we work together to verify the solution and make sure that it can fit into the OT system. It doesn't cause any interruption. And of course, the integration is a key point here. So when Vjornil said about the technology, I would say in ABB we had the task that all the cybersecurity solutions we are using in the OT system must be or can it has to be monitored by the ship owner. So we need to allow APIs that can be sent outside of ABB OT system. So if we are using an antivirus solution or a backup solution, we should enable this solution to be monitored by the ship owners. So yeah, that's how we see the challenge. The integration have been a very big challenge for us, but we are improving, working with the ship owners and the shipyards. We are improving with time.
Any thoughts on that, Vjornil?
No, I think Ahmed covered it very well. I think he alluded to it. It's not always a happy marriage between all of us, right? Because we have a lot of agreements to make, right, as well, right? We understand a lot of these things, right? Ensuring that a tool, let's say that we select on a silo, actually performs well on their system and operates well, and then that we can validate how we update that tool when needed is a key item, right? When trying to implement anything. We also have the other side of the token, right? We have a lot of vendors which integrate things, right? And they bring in their own solutions, and then we end up operating a lot of solutions, right? And you know, in a single ship, you can have 90 vendors there, right? Providing you with solutions. So we are all flexible here in this industry. This is part of, you know, working together and understanding each other, understanding where we're at, understanding the pains that we cause to our suppliers and the pains that they may cause to us, right? So it's part of that collaboration. But 100% agree with their comments regarding you know, where our stocks stand today.
Right. Jarly, anything to add to what Vjornil said?
I think what I said now is important, and I think it's important to understand why. Because if you compare the maritime industry, it's a very excellent industry, and I think we do a big impact in global trade, in global financing, in the well-being of people. But at the same time, it's different from other industries. If you look at an airline industry or a car industry, a typically airplane manufacturer is the system integrator from the early days of designing that vessel until it's finished at end of life. The same goes for a car. The car manufacturer designs it, has workshops, and is responsible for the whole end-to-end life cycle. In maritime, it's a more fragmented responsibility. You will have different suppliers coming with their part. The yard put it in together. So the yard is actually an integrator, but the yard cannot have the detailed knowledge that ABB as suppliers have on their systems. So they're actually piecing together something which they have not fully in detail specified as a car that made in millions of examples, right? So the piecing of something together has risks. Let's say if a sensor breaks down, or it can even cause blackout because two systems have different priorities. So that's a risk by integration. And then maybe after a year, the warranty from the yard is gone, and then the owner is the system integrator. So then Carnival is there suddenly responsible for the full scope of the vessel, make sure that they have to know every bits and bits of this vessel. But they did not went into the design of each of the parts of it. So this moving of integration responsibility and the impact it may have on the full life cycle and the fragmented setup of the maritime industry is a challenge. And I think we need to move beyond what we had now. So the supplier of an engine came and made maintenance and changed oil, but there may not be a maintenance plan for the software patching, for the updates, for keeping that valid. As Werner mentioned, if you order a ship, it's 5 years until it's delivered. The Windows XP versions and the software that was agreed there is maybe end of life. So to have that part as a continuously getting something delivered which is actually usable and secure is a major challenge due to this lack of one integrator across the life cycle.
And Pernille, how do you manage that risk when you take over that integrator responsibility?
Yeah, it's been quite the exercise, I would say, throughout the years. But things have gotten a lot better, right? We've learned to collaborate from the moment in which we write contracts nowadays, right? So now we're at the very early stage of the inception of a ship. Now, let's say if you go back to the ships we had prior to 2020, 21, right? It's a different exercise. It's more of a learning curve after the ship is delivered. You're going in there to understand, okay, what did I get? One of the first things we do for all the ships that are delivered to us is to go and pen test them. So we can understand what's the scope of what's in here, what's vulnerable, can we understand it a little more? Obviously, now that we have, our network analyzer solution, we get a sneak peek in there into the systems, and we see operating systems, we see what's going on in there. We get to understand the risk. Then we have, very high level conversations with our vendors. Okay, how do we get these systems to the next level? Can we update some of these systems? Is the system capable of receiving an update? That's another thing, right? Can it go to the next Windows level, whatever, Linux level, etc. So those are some of the key things, right? And sadly, we do find systems that cannot be upgraded. That you receive a brand new ship, and they'll tell you, for you to upgrade that PC, you have to change the whole thing, and that's X amount of million, and that might not be something in the appetite of our company. Obviously, there's multiple ways to mitigate risk at that level. There's obviously isolation. It's the first thing you start thinking of. Controls around the edge of that system, controls on how you use that system, right? So we've defined a lot of those things for our environments. But again, there's a lot of creativity in how you manage risk for the older ships. But a lot of it comes down to what controls you put in place at the edge of those systems to manage and contain what's in there, and to contain how they interact with other OT systems as well. And then talking to the other vendor to say, can you please distrust that other system as much as possible on your end, right? So just because of the nature of what it's doing or how it's built as well. So there's those conversations. luckily, we have a lot of our vendors have come up to the maturity of what an ABB has, which, they've thought of these things in advance when they deliver their products, and they're firewalling off a lot of the things that are integrating into them and that they're integrating into. And it makes our jobs a little easier when it comes to that. But so many ways to skin the cat here in the maritime industry when it comes to managing risks.
And Ahmed, do you see your role evolving in maritime cybersecurity operations as a result?
Absolutely. Actually, very good points made by the guys here. A vessel is a complex environment with, as Vjornil said, maybe a 90 vendor in a single vessel. That's a lot of vendors and means a lot of systems and a lot of cybersecurity solutions. So it's very important for us as a vendor to understand the complexity here and try our best to work with the ship owners and make sure that they are able to operate the cybersecurity solution we apply on board. Because if we apply the cybersecurity solution without having a plan for maintenance, then the cybersecurity solution actually use its value. And we had a very good exercise, as Vjornil indicated, about the network analyzing solution. Integrating into network analyzing solution have been an excellent exercise we did together with Carnival. So again, the main point or the key point here for the operation is to integrate into the monitoring systems. So ABB have been developing our products to make sure that it can be integrated into the customer or the ship owner monitoring systems, including network analyzing, and also if they have security information solutions and monitoring solutions. Of course, we have also a 40 plus service locations globally. So ABB is a very big and very global company. We are able to support our customers 24/7. We can be part of their processes and procedures, the incident response and the disaster recovery. We are getting integrated into the ship owners' process and procedures. They can reach us at any time. We can support them to mitigate a cyber risk or to actually respond to a cyber attack. So we see ABB as a vendor is part of the cyber operation of the ship owner, and we need to be part of the processes and procedures they have.
And Jarli, would you like to add something to that?
I think it's important that the suppliers also feel being part of an integrator and contributing to the integrator role, both of the yard and the owner. As we have this, say, fragmented setup, the supplier will need to support the owner in operation. The owner cannot have full control of all those complex vessels. So definitely, it's a key task. Maintenance does not only include taking away rusty parts or changing oil, it's also about the software.
And I was going to say now, building off Jarli's point, Ahmed, how do you do your maintenance, so to speak, on your systems? Is it at specific intervals or as updates are developed in-house? How does that work?
Yeah, we agree with the ship owner, depending on their targets. We can be actually patching the system, doing the maintenance every quarter, every half year. In some cases also it can be every month, depending on the ship owner targets. Of course, we have backup solutions and rollback functionality. So when we patch the system, if anything happens, we are ready to restore the system back in operation. As I said, keep the system in operation is our main task in OT cybersecurity, right? So yes, we do the maintenance. We join the ship owners to decide the intervals based on the risk of the system and if the system is essential or not. And of course, we can do the maintenance every based on this interval.
And I was going to say, Vernil, then, how do you view the role of control system vendors in the overall cybersecurity operations? What are your approaches or frameworks do you believe work the best when integrating vendor activities?
Well, for us, that's just another day, right? Because a lot of our agreements when we take ownership of a ship is that our vendors are actually conducting the maintenance for a lot of our systems. Our vendors are our SMEs. Our vendors are tier 1, 2, 3 levels of support in many cases. In some situations, our ship personnel is capable of handling a lot of the basic troubleshooting for our systems. But as soon as things get a little bit complex, the vendor is immediately engaged. One of our big drivers is to be, and Ahmed mentioned, is being able to do remote services, right? For many reasons. Number one, because we want to get things done quickly without having to fly people onto the ship, but also there is obviously an implied savings. I would say on both ends, the vendor and our end, for not having to send technicians to our ships. But the life cycle of a ship is heavily dependent on the agreements we have with our vendors from zero to end. At least that is today. I don't think a lot of that is going to change. There doesn't seem to be a growing or even an available amount of folks that we could even hire to take over those tasks. Even if we wanted to build, let's say, the Windows support group for OT or the Linux support group for OT, and that because it gets very specific then when they have to support, let's say, an ABB system versus a competitor system, right? So it's just very complex at that level. Even for them, I believe it gets very complex between their own products, right? Therefore, I don't see that changing anytime soon. I believe we will be reliant on our vendors for a long time. Obviously, there are change management processes that we have defined. We have a health, environmental safety, and security system, which is our safety management system. Basically, we call it our global HES, where we define what are the expectations for change management, but what are the expectations for handling and touching OT systems, et cetera. Maybe less from a cybersecurity standpoint and more from an operational standpoint, but obviously from a cyber standpoint, we're very engaged with these processes across our organization.
Right. Now let's see if we can integrate a few questions from our audience. And one of the first questions here is cyber pirates and cyber criminals, etc. Are there cyber pirates in the marine OT environment? You know, how advanced are they? Jarle, you want to address that one?
That's a good question. I don't think it's maybe in the purpose as we know the Pirates of the Caribbean, all those aspects, but it's more, I think most criminals in the cyber domain are in the business of making money, right? So it means that they will try to impact systems to get ransomware money. That's the big amount, and it doesn't matter if it's a maritime company or any other kind of company. And they typically attack the IT side, because that's where you have the most computers being the same and where you have the biggest impact and get best return on your investment. But what we see is that when we connect IT down to OT systems, you have collateral damage, maybe not even intended damage, and that can have huge safety impacts. So at the moment, I think there's the biggest amount of attacks towards the IT part, but I don't think we should be ignorant about the possibility of control system being attacked, because shipping is part of world trade. A cruise ship has thousands of passengers on board that may have an interest in knowing something else. A luxury yacht of a rich famous person may have other information which is relevant. An LNG ship carrying LNG cargo is part of global politics around energy trade. Container ships are the backbone of the world industry. So there is potential more political motives also for taking out ships. So I think the pirates would probably go where they earn the most money, which is on the IT side, but you may have more targeted segment-specific attacks as well, but we haven't seen so many of those, at least as far as I know.
But Vernil, I see you shaking your head. Any comments or thoughts on that?
No, I think Jarly has a really good point. At least the pirates are not jumping on board anymore, but there's a few things that we do see. So we see a lot of what's happening between nation states in terms of how they're defending their spaces is impacting the maritime industry, specifically around GNSS jamming or AIS jamming and spoofing, right? That we do see a lot of impacts to the point where we've had ships that we've called out from a port, right? We said, do not go and conduct your berthing there. We've seen states, notify all ships not to stop navigation around certain areas, right? We've seen these kind of impacts. We've seen ships go aground because of GNSS jamming and spoofing. So there is an impact. I would say the majority of the impact right now is being caused by nation states. The other threat that we see is that there's not a lot of the lone wolf, I would say, out there trying to target the maritime industry. It's either nation states or very organized groups that are targeting the maritime industry. And like Jarly said, most of them are actually targeting the maritime industry for money. So most of them are stopping at the IT level. That doesn't mean that they don't have the capability of impacting OT. We've seen many impacts to OT in other industries that we can easily translate to maritime, right? Because that's the key. We look at some of those things that are happening elsewhere. We're saying, oh, those are the same switches that we use. Those are the same PLCs that we use, right? So if they're successful in those areas, they're obviously very successful here in the maritime space at some point. So the threat is there. The impacts, at least not widely known to be there. The other side of the coin is that there's not a lot of states that require you to report cyber incidents. So a lot of ships can be flagged in places, especially a lot of ships that come out of Asia, that may not have to report that they've undergone a cyber attack. You may not ever hear about it, right? Whereas obviously we know that certain ships, depending on where they go, obviously are required or mandated to report these things. So those are challenges. We, Carnival, have been part of that, right? We've published that we've had incidents in the past. To us, they were twofold, right? In a way, sad that we were hit, right? And the other side of it was good. We invested on making our environments a lot more robust. And I want to knock on all the wood around me that we've been very lucky, right, to avert a lot of things. One of the stats that we have is that every quarter, at least for Carnival Corporation, we have over 1.2 trillion attempts of someone trying to come into our environment. Trillion. So just food for thought there on what's happening.
And Ahmed, maybe you want to add to that. How do you harden your systems against cyber pirates?
Of course, as the guys indicated earlier, network segmentation, network segregation is a key point. Be very well segregated from the IT environment. Of course, we understand that there might be some solutions that we need to integrate with. We need to it need to be monitoring our cybersecurity solutions, but we need to allow only the needed traffic to move from IT to OT. So network segmentation and segregation is really key for protecting our system. Of course, defense in depth also is required. So many other solutions are required to be able to defend our systems. So the risk is there, and we need to cooperate together and work together to protect our systems.
Great, thank you for that, Ahmed. And it looks like we're just about out of time. I was going to say, certainly thank you to our panelists, and I'll have Priscilla close out the webinar then.
Yes, thank you. On behalf of all of us at ABB, thank you guys so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge and expertise, even answering a few fun questions on parts of the Caribbean here from our audience. Thank you again, John, for moderating the panel. And one of the biggest things that it did stick with me beyond all of the information that you guys share is how important is the collaboration and the coordination between all of us for the greater good, right? So we're all learning together as we move forward on the technology side, on the development of the technology with Ahmad and the implementation with the customer and adapting to the environment and the regulations, as Charlie mentioned. So thank you to all of you for taking the time to joining us. Thank you for all of you guys that watched. I know we ran out of time to answer the questions, but we will answer them in writing, and we'll contact you guys via email with answers. So thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.